Hi, I'm Sabrina. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do a story time video today about my pregnancy with my daughter. The reason it keeps striking me is first that it already passed, but it's infant loss and pregnancy loss awareness month. And even though it already passed the actual day, it's still the month of October, so I can still talk about it. So last year at this time, I was already pregnant. I had decided that we were ready for another baby. I don't know why, because having a toddler is crazy, but he wasn't 2 yet, so I didn't know quite how crazy. And so Tyler got a job because we had been struggling with like unemployment and stuff. So he got a job, and then we got pregnant. It took us 3 months to actually get pregnant because I figured out that my cycle is 25 days long, not 28, like most people, just because with Paxton, when we were trying to get pregnant with him, it was kind of like we just didn't try not to have a baby anymore twice, and that we had a baby. And with this one, like, we were actively trying because, like, when you have a kid, you have to time things out because, like, having a kid is exhausting. And so you don't have time to just try all the time. And yeah, so I remember that once I got pregnant, I started feeling really pregnant really quickly. I was pretty sure I was pregnant before I took a test because I was nauseous, and I never was one who actually, like, maybe once or twice each pregnancy I actually got sick from my nausea, but I would just have like aching nausea all day, every day, and worse with this pregnancy, obviously. So I think it was November 18th, which is kind of crazy, but I'll get into why it's crazy later. But November 18th, I took a test and figured out we were indeed pregnant and having a second child. So at that point, I would have been 5 or 6 weeks pregnant. With Paxton, we told everyone quite quickly. We let them know we were pregnant because we were excited. And this one, I wanted to wait until Christmas because it was close, so we could just like put it off and wait till Christmas to tell everybody that I was pregnant. And I think I actually found out I was 4 weeks that I was pregnant. So because my hormones were super high, so it was able to pick it up like that. And pro tip, the dollar store tests work just as well as the expensive tests that you get at the pharmacy. Anyway, so fast forward, my hormones were insane. I ended up giving up my permanent position at work and really I had wanted to be a casual for a long time, but this just surged it into me that no, I was done. I'm gonna have 2 kids and whatever, and what I thought was 2 kids. Anyway, so I was, just insane, and I knew I was like, I kept calling it like soul crushingly tired because I was so tired. I couldn't, like, I would wake up for work, get off work, come home, nap for 3 hours, get up, feed Paxton dinner, and go back to bed by 8 o'clock and sleep all night. And I was still exhausted. And then between exhaustion and not being able to sleep, it was just like, I was just tired all the time, but also hungry. But then if I ate too much food, I was in actual pain from being so nauseous. Like, it was, yeah. And then I started to get headaches, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, was I this pregnant last time? Like, I did not feel as bad last time as I do right now. So, start, trucking along in the pregnancy, and no one knows yet. It's just Ty, and I'm just like I was pretty into doing my makeup right before. I stopped wearing makeup, did not have time or energy to deal with makeup. people at work knew I was pregnant before our family did because I couldn't really hide it. Like, I'm a healthcare assistant, so I take care of people in long-term care facilities, and it's my job to serve breakfast. And it was the same with Paxton. I couldn't stand next to the steam tables with the eggs in them because I would just start to feel sick from the smell of eggs. So I couldn't serve breakfast. I could just kind of sit with people and help them eat. And then there's a few times I had to like run to a bathroom and, get sick. Not often, but at least 2 or 3 times, enough that it was noticeable. And one of the ladies that I work with, like, I told her right away. As soon as I took a positive test, I told her because she knew I'd been trying for another baby, or that I was ready for another baby. So then, how long? So then, that was most of November. I spent just feeling pretty ill. My mom knew. I told her right away because, I don't know, I just did. So then, fast forward to Christmas time, and we made a cute little shirt for my son that said Big Brother July 2019. I'd seen my midwives a couple of times, or maybe it was only once, and we'd scheduled my early dating ultrasound, and yeah, everything seemed pretty normal. I just felt, I was like, so by Christmas I was 9 weeks pregnant, and I was like, man, I'm huge already. Like with Paxton, you couldn't even tell I was pregnant yet. And this one, it looked like I'd gained like 15 pounds just in my belly. And I was like, I'm really glad we're telling everyone because there's no way I'm hiding this anymore. Like, I'm huge. Like, what is wrong with me? I knew people popped with their second baby faster, but like, this is ridiculous. So, yeah, told everyone, and everyone's really excited and whatever. And for my last pregnancy, my mom lived in Fort McMurray, so she wasn't able to be a big part of my pregnancy. And I had my early dating ultrasound on December 29th. And she was able to be there for it, which was cool because she hadn't ever been able to be there before. So she comes to my ultrasound, and everything's like seems kind of normal, and like other than, like I said, like at Christmas dinner I could not eat more than like half a plate of food without literally having to go lay down and writhe in pain because I was just in so much pain just eating. So we go to my ultrasound, and they start doing it. My mom's standing at the end of the bed, and she starts to like kind of well up with tears, and I'm like thinking in my head, I didn't say this out loud, I'm like, Mom, you had 4 kids, like it's not that big of a deal, it's just an ultrasound. The tech was super quiet, and I'm like, man, like, is everything okay? Like, this is weird, she's so quiet. So I just look at her, I'm like, well, am I growing a human? And she goes, actually, you're growing 2. And I was like, pardon me? And she's like, yeah, there's 2. And I'm like, no, there's not. And I started like freaking out. I remember going, and just starting like nervous laughter. Like I was like, no, there's not. 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 And I was freaking out. And I started nervous laughing really loud, like, And I'm like, you're joking, right? Like, that's a joke. And she's like, I don't know you at all to joke with you. Like, I'm not joking. And I'm like, oh gosh, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have two more babies. I looked at my mom and I was like, my poor son, like, he's gonna have to really share me, like, that sucks. So then, yeah, I guess, when the ultrasound tech came back and gave me my disc for the pictures, she, said that the nurses were coming to check to make sure I wasn't attacking her because I was freaking out so bad. And so we told everyone except Tyler's mom. I came home. I think I have a clip somewhere. I'll show you what Tyler did when I came home and told him we were having twins. We were like already in a super overwhelmed spot because I wasn't able to do anything to help around the house. So the house was a mess. I was an emotional mess. Like, we were just exhausted from being parents, and now I'm telling him we're gonna have 2 more babies, and like, I think we both went through this shock period where we were like, holy crap, there's going to be two more at the same time. And like, once you already have one kid, you know how hard it is. And then you're like, you're going to add two at the same time, both crying and both freaking out. Like, I don't know how I'm going to handle that. So we went through this whole mourning period, like, and then at 12 weeks, we still weren't done with the mourning period. And then at 12 weeks, I woke up and I had a weird bleed. I just stood up and blood came out. It wasn't a lot, and it was only once. And so I rushed to the hospital. They actually get an ultrasound tech in to check on the babies. Because there was no explanation. Because the doctor in Emerge said I have to get an ultrasound tech in here because I've never actually scanned twins before, so I don't really know what I'm looking for. She's like, I can tell you they both still have heartbeats. They both look fine from my standpoint. That's all I can tell you. And I was like, okay. So that was the second time I got to see them, and they were wiggling around and looking a little bigger, like real little humans, and I saw their little heartbeats, and it was pretty cool, but still scary because they couldn't tell me why I bled. And I think I know why now, but I'll get into that later. So, after thinking I was going to lose them both at that point, I wasn't in a mourning period anymore. I was like, I want these babies. I might be scared, and I might not be ready right now, but I want these babies. These are my babies. So, went through, I had stopped working December 19th, and that just happened that I had taken, I had gone casual, so I hadn't taken anything over the holidays, and then found out that I was pregnant with twins, and my job is so physical that I was like, okay, no, I'm not going back to work. And also just because of what the ultrasound tech had said at my first ultrasound, saying that they were modi twins, which means they were identical twins sharing a placenta, but they were in separate sacs, separated by a membrane. It just meant that it was even more complicated and more high risk, so it was probably best that I didn't go back to work. And it was funny because I kept telling my midwife when I'd go see her, I'm so tired. And she's like, yeah, you'll, just try not to nap in the afternoon, you'll sleep better at night. And I was like, no, I'm, really tired. And then it was like, yeah, obviously I was actually really tired because I was growing two babies, not one. So then fast forward again, we go and see, I think I was 14 or 15 weeks, when we went to go see Dr. Mula, who is, I shouldn't say names, but oh well. He's the doctor that delivered my son in his emergency C-section, which will be another story for another time. So we go and see him, and he tells us about, what can happen with modi twins, and discussed VBAC, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, which is what I wanted to do, try to do, even though it would be difficult with twins. I said that's what I would like to try. And we discussed all what that meant, which sometimes means, if you want to deliver twins vaginally, sometimes it means that you actually end up having to deliver one vaginally, and then if one gets stuck or something, then you have to have a C-section for the other one, which was okay with me. So you have to deliver in the delivery room or in the operating room, just in case you have to switch to a C-section really fast. So I was preparing myself for all that, and I was preparing myself for what it was going to look like to nurse two babies, because I love breastfeeding. And I was preparing my mind for all of this without preparing myself. So there's things that can go wrong with identical twins. One of them is selective intrauterine growth restriction. Another one is twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And the other one is TAPS, which is similar to twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, but not the same. And then just other regular baby things that can happen that are complicated, or complications with the mom. You're at higher risk for preeclampsia and other pregnancy related illnesses and stuff like that. but I'll get into what happened with us and what it all meant later in a little bit. So anyway, so my doctor was super diligent and was in contact with MFM in Vancouver as soon as he told them that we were having Modi twins. And I was advised to start taking baby aspirin and calcium to lower my chance of having high blood pressure in my pregnancy because I had it last time with Pakistan. So I started doing that. And then he also, like, I had been doing my own research, and he had ordered an ultrasound for 20 weeks. And I was like, okay, but that's not actually soon enough. With Modi twins, you have to start having ultrasounds at 16 weeks to monitor for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So I was going to call him, and he ended up calling me. And the MFM doctors had told him, hey, no, like, she needs to get ultrasounds every 2 weeks, starting at 16 weeks. And he was like, okay, like, we'll schedule those. Fair enough. So, you know, then at 16 weeks, almost 17 weeks, I got my first of many ultrasounds. And it was really scary. This is when everything started to go haywire because it was super early in the morning. I had to leave Paxton at home, and I went to the ultrasound, and they were so cute. You could see them like beating the crap out of each other. One's kicking the other in the head, and I didn't know at the time they were girls, but I could just see them in there just like beating each other up and kicking around. And then she measured Kinsley, and Kinsley in me was baby A. So she's measuring her, and everything looks great. Like, I can look on the screen and see the numbers popping up showing how, like, what gestational age she looked like based on the ultrasound pictures. And I was like, oh, she's measuring a little bit ahead. That's pretty cool. And, like, she was looking like a real baby at this point in this ultrasound. And then she started ultrasounding baby B, and I noticed right away that the numbers were coming up that I was 16 weeks, and the numbers were coming up that Serafina was 14 weeks. And she looked way smaller. And then even in like the ultrasound pictures I had afterwards, I kept looking at them and going, there's something off about this. Baby B doesn't look right. Her arms look really short, and her head looks really small in comparison to her sisters. Like, what is going on? And the ultrasound tech, because they're not supposed to give you results. So the ultrasound tech, as she was scanning baby B, just says to me, hey, like, you're going to see Dr. Mula today, right? I was like, no, I'm going to see the midwives for that's the appointment I have today as midwife. She's like, okay. And she didn't say anything the rest of the ultrasound. And I knew it was ominous. I just put it out of my mind. I was like, she's just doing her job, like, whatever. There's nothing weird going on. But at the same time, I had a gut feeling that something was really wrong. So I go to my appointment. They don't have any of the reports from the ultrasound yet to look at because it was 2 hours before, so the radiologist hadn't looked at them yet. And I was like, okay, like, everything's probably fine. Like, sometimes one twin is a little smaller. That's fine. Like, nothing weird is happening. And then the next day, I called Appletree because I had this gut feeling and I wanted to know the results of the ultrasound. So I called Appletree and talked to the receptionist and said, hey, like, one of the doctors and the midwives was going to call me with the results from my ultrasound because they didn't have the results yesterday. I just want to know if they're there, if they've looked at them, and no one has called me. I'm going to assume everything's fine. So she looks, she says, yes, they're opened, but none of the doctors or midwives said anything to me, so it's probably fine. It's like, okay, I gotta pause this. Sorry, I had to run away. The light's coming through the curtain, and I actually kind of like it, so I'm not going to change it. I like those random flashes of light. I think they're kind of cool. Anyway, so, yeah, whoever had already opened the ultrasound, who was it? The receptionist had said, like, yeah, it's probably fine. They didn't tell me to call you with any results. So, at that point, my mind was put at ease. I thought that everything was fine. But the reason was that a doctor was the one that should have told me, not the receptionist, and that's why they hadn't told me anything. So I think it was about 4 or 5 in the evening. I got, maybe it was even 3 or 4. Anyway, So I got a call from, I can't even remember who it was at Appletree. I can't remember names because my brain was just... So I get the call that, yeah, so there was something abnormal in your ultrasound. One of your twins is measuring quite a lot smaller than the other one. And we don't know why. I know you wanted monitoring for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, so we're going to forward your file to Vancouver to go see the MFM doctors if they take your case. They have to triage you to figure out if you hit the top of the triage list or not. So, I had already had a plan and an appointment made to go have a fetal echo done because twins can have a higher instance of congenital heart defects. So I hadn't thought that I had to go to Vancouver yet. And then they told me, and I was 17 weeks, I think, at this point. So they told me I was pregnant, or that I had to go to Vancouver, and I was like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe that. Like, this was Valentine's Day, specifically, I remember. Because I remember thinking how crazy it was that Valentine's Day was the day I was being told that something bad might happen. I went out to dinner with Tyler and I was stressing out. I think we went to the Bombi. And yeah, so then I got a call the next day because they said, like, they'll decide how serious your case is and you'll get a call to go within the next 2 weeks. So it was a long weekend for Family Day in Canada, and this was the Wednesday before that, and I got called to say, hey, we'll make an appointment for you for Wednesday, the following Tuesday after the long weekend. And I was like, holy, I can't believe it's that fast. There must really be something wrong that they want to check me that quickly. Because it's like an emergency room, right? Like, only the sickest people get seen first. So we made a plan, not knowing that there was a bunch of charities that could have paid for flights and stuff. We used air miles. And, we had a good weekend with our family. And then I went to Vancouver. And, of course, I was terrified, but I didn't know at first what was going on. I just thought they were going to scan my babies, tell me, yeah, one's a little smaller, they'll be fine, and, away I go. Like, nothing is happening. That's weird. But that was the furthest from the truth. So my ultrasound was really early. I'm pretty sure it was at, like, 7:30 or 8 in the morning. And we had arranged for me to stay at my brother-in-law's apartment on the North Shore of Vancouver, so I had to get on the train and meander the city by myself, which was really scary in the beginning. But I got there, and I walked from the SkyTrain station to the hospital, which is actually a really far walk. And it's already in a lot of pain because was growing so fast that my pelvis was hurting and my back was hurting. And I was only like 17 weeks pregnant, 18 weeks maybe almost at this point. So I start getting scanned by a student ultrasound tech. And so there's 2 people scanning me. And ultrasound techs really don't tell you anything that's going on. That's not their job. Their job is just to take pictures. So they were scanning me and scanning me and scanning me and scanning me, and my bladder's full, and like the student scanned Kinsley, baby A, the whole time, and then gave it to her teacher. And I was like, well, that's weird. Why is the teacher scanning baby B? Shouldn't it be the student doing both? Like, they're both the same. And then after they scanned baby B, I had already been on the ultrasound table for like 2 hours. Sorry, I had to grab Kinsley. So I'd already been on the ultrasound table for 2 hours before one of the MFM doctors came in with another, like, fellow. There's different ranks of doctors, and it was a fellow MFM doctor. So that was 2 doctors coming in to scan me. And they let me go pee at some point because I didn't realize that they only really need you to hold your bladder so that they can test the length of see the length of your cervix, and then you can go pee and they can look at everything else. I had no idea. So yeah, so then the MFM doctor comes in, and at this point I'm like, okay, I've been laying here for a really long time. Something's not okay. So they scan and scan and scan and scan, and I can hear them saying at this point words I didn't understand. I know them now, but I didn't understand them. They're using all these medical terms. I'm like, oh my God, like, what's happening? There's something really bad happening right now. But they're gonna be okay. They're gonna be okay. So this girl was either British or Australian or something, this doctor, and she says, okay, I want you to sit up. So I sit up, and she comes to the other side of the bed, and she says, is anyone here with you today? I said, no, I came by myself. I didn't have anyone to come with me. She goes, okay. She says, there's no easy way to tell you this. There's something wrong with baby B's brain. She, apart from being 50% smaller, which we can see, she has severe ventricular megaly, which she was saying, like, in your brain, you have fluid pockets that are cerebral spinal fluid, and she was saying that hers are too big, and they don't know why, but they're pushing out all of her actual brain matter, pushing it to the side of her skull. And they think that it might be from infection, or she had a brain bleed or something. So it just damaged her brain. So they said she's a sick baby. We don't think she's gonna make it the length of the pregnancy. And she said, and she's also right now she's 40% smaller than her sister. And she said sometimes we see babies that are a little bit smaller, but that's quite a big difference. And she said we also can't see that she has any fluid. We can't see a stomach, and we can't see any kidneys, and that means that she's not processing any fluid or regenerating it on her own. We don't know if we don't know why. She said there is also something wrong with baby A's heart. So she's had me lay back down, and she scanned me again, and she showed me first the difference between Seraphina and Kinsley's brain, and showed me, like, when they went over their heads, you could, like, at certain angles, you could actually see, like, the folds in Kinsley's brain. And in Seraphina's, there was nothing. It was just black. There was no brain development at all. Like, you could see, like you have the two sides of your brain, and you could see, like, a line between the two, and that was really it. There wasn't anything else. And maybe I'll insert some ultrasound photos so I can show you what I mean. But there was just there was nothing there. Like, you could see very clearly there was nothing there. And then she showed me Kinsley's heart, and showed me, because they press this button and you can see blood flow. And they showed me where the blood wasn't going through properly in Kinsley's heart, and where it was backflowing through her tricuspid valve. And she said, so we're going to get you off this table. You've been sitting here for 3.5 hours. You probably need to walk around. But I know you don't want to be out with everyone out there, because I was bawling, because I looked at her and I said, I'm going to cry. She said, of course you're going to cry. This is really sad. So I was, like, bawling, and then they took me to a room that was, the way it's set up is, like, you walk into the women's side of the hospital, and there's the ultrasound area on the right, and then you turn left and it's the clinic rooms. So they took me to a clinic room that was supposed to be booked, and they just let me sit in there by myself so I could make my phone calls. And I called Tyler, and I told him what they told me. And I said, baby B is not okay. She's never going to be okay. She's really, really sick. And I don't know what we're going to do yet, but yeah, I just told him. I was crying really hard. And then I called my mom and she got on a plane and came so that I wouldn't be by myself the next day when I was supposed to go home the next day. And my son's birthday was the Friday. I was supposed to go home the next day, which was a Thursday. And yeah, like I just didn't, I think my timeline's a little off. It was a Wednesday I had my appointment and I was supposed to go home on the Thursday. We had to change my flight to Saturday because they wanted to see me the next day too. So I ended up getting to the hospital at 7:30 in the morning and I didn't leave until 5 o'clock. Because I went out and they said, like, your appointment, like, we don't really have an actual appointment time for you. So go get lunch and we will discuss your case at our lunch meeting and then we will talk to you. So I went and got lunch, like, as if I could actually eat. I didn't eat. I, like, went and sat in the cafeteria and stared at my lunch and didn't eat a freaking thing. And so I think it was like 1:30, 2 o'clock, they brought me back and I was talking to two of them. I had an interview with a geneticist because they wanted to make sure nothing was genetic that was going on. So, and at this point they weren't really concerned about that, but they still had a geneticist talk to me. I think it was a geneticist resident. So he talked to me about my family history a little bit and stuff. And then, then he came in and so did the other doctor, the doctor that was there when Kinsey was born came in and talked to me. And I had Tyler on speaker and they explained to us how Modi twins work, which I knew, but I don't know if Tyler knew. So saying that, like at some point very early in our pregnancy, our egg split and decided it wanted to be two babies. And when that happened, not everything was formed properly. Kinsley's heart was formed poorly, and whatever happened with Serafina, they didn't know. Also, I always forget that at some point too, I also had a fetal echo to check on Kinsley's heart to see if it was even going to be viable. So, all in all, that day I'd spent 6 hours being ultrasounded. And I was ultrasounded by a fetal cardiologist or MFM something. I only saw her that one time, so Dr. Dahlgren was telling us all about, here's what happened so that you have two babies in you. And she also told us about Serafina's cord insertion. So Kinsley's was normal, where it came from her belly button and just like stuck into the middle of my placenta. There was nothing weird about it. It just stuck in there really well. And that's why she was so big, because she had a really good part of the placenta. And then she told me that Serafina's kind of went up the side of the sac and then plugged into the side, split in three like this. And they call it a velamentous cord insertion, which just means she didn't have any placenta, really, which is why she wasn't growing. So then they laid out our options, and they said, you can scrap this whole pregnancy and say, you know what, this is not what we had in mind. You can do...
Hey, Mama, can I want some goldfish?
Okay, in a little bit, Kay. Can you say hi? So yeah, then they gave us the option of selective termination, which was to terminate baby B because she was sick and they knew she wasn't going to make it. And my placenta was anterior, so it made it which means it was here to the front of my body, which made everything even more complicated. because they gave us the options on how they could do what they needed to do if that was our decision. And then they told us they could, because they were also sharing an artery in the placenta, which, like, I guess one of the arteries that was going to each baby had grown together, which it's not supposed to do, which is kind of like twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, except usually in classic twin-to-twin, it's an artery to a vein that are connected. Paxton, don't do that, please. Sorry, just had to take a break to yell at my toddler. So, yeah, they told us I could just separate their blood and try for both babies. But then they just reiterated how sick Serafina was. She was really, really sick. They said that if we didn't do something, like our fourth option was just like natural selection, let what was going to happen. But they told us that because the girls were sharing blood, if Serafina died on her own, it would probably kill Kinsley too if we did nothing, because the blood volume that was in Serafina would rush to Kinsley and cause her to be overloaded with blood and give her a stroke, and she would probably die. So, at that point, they looked at me and I had hit a wall. I had nothing else I couldn't contribute. I couldn't absorb anything else. I was just done. I was finished, and they could tell, and I told them I just need to leave here right now and go. I need to talk to my fiance. I need to video call with my son. I just need to get out of here. So I went back to the North Shore and came back the next day, where I met the best doctor I've ever met in my whole life. So my mom got there. She came to Justin's apartment, and we talked and we cried and we talked about how sad it was, and I talked about how cool it was that I got to be pregnant with twins, and how, no matter what we chose to do or no matter what happened, like, this was going to change me fundamentally, because they were just so cool. It was so cool to be pregnant with identical twins. Like, even just the idea of it is really neat.
I need a goldfish.
And yeah, it was at that point that I decided that no matter what, both girls were going to have a name. And if we lost both of them, they both mattered. And her life mattered. Even if it was really short and never outside of me, her life mattered. And we also decided that that's how we would say that. Tell Kinsley that the reason her heart isn't proper is because she knew her sister wasn't going to make it, and it broke her heart. So my mom and I went back really early the next day. We ended up taking a taxi, I think. Yeah, we took transit. I actually really like transit. I think it's really relaxing somehow. So we took it back, and we didn't have an actual ultrasound slot because I wasn't supposed to be getting ultrasounded that day. So we got to go to this really fancy research ultrasound machine, and the doctor that we went to go see was actually really stoked about it, because she said it's a really nice machine because it's for research, and research gets a lot of money. So her name was Tracy. I won't use her last name, but she knew my OB and Nelson really well, and they were texting each other, and she was telling him what was going on and keeping him updated. And we were seeing her specifically because she was the one that mapped out arteries in placentas. Like, this whole entire ultrasound was just on my placenta so that she could map out and tell me what was being shared and if doing a laser procedure on the girls was even going to be possible. So we spent another 2 hours being ultrasounded. And at the end of that ultrasound, she said, I don't think at this point the best decision is to do anything. Because I had also been asked. It was kind of crazy because we were waiting for our ultrasound. And the receptionist had come and said, have you eaten today? And I said, yes. And she gave me a look and I said, why? And then I was like, is that for pre-op stuff? Because we're not doing anything today. Like, I knew no matter what, like, today was not the day we were making any decisions. And she just kind of went, oh. And we went on our way. And yeah, we talked to Tracy a lot. She's seriously the coolest doctor I've ever met in my whole life. She's like, grew up in Alberta and like on the weekends like lived like off the grid, and she's just a really cool person. And like all the doctors I met down there were just so like down to earth and really cool. So yeah, after mapping it out, she said it's gonna be tricky, but I think a laser is possible. It's like, okay. And she said, but I want to wait a little while to give your placenta more of a chance to stretch out. Because when you're like early pregnant, your placenta's all like curled up. Not curled up, that's not the right word, but like if you were to grab a blanket and like pull it up in the middle, it's kind of like that because you're not stretched out yet. So the bigger you get, the more your placenta stretches. And, oh, you want me to open that? So, there you go, baby. So, yeah, she did all that ultrasound, told us, and she was also the one that told us they were girls. I knew from the moment they told me I was having twins that they were girls. But she confirmed that they were girls. You're making a mess. So, yeah. So I left. We stayed the night in Vancouver a couple more nights. And then I left on Saturday. And came home. I missed my son's second birthday. And even Tracy was like, well, we got to get you home sooner. It's your son's second birthday. And I was like, no, it's not possible. Like, it sucks, but it's not going to happen. And we'd had a birthday party planned. Didn't do that. Because we were not into it. And he didn't know at that point that he didn't have a birthday party. So we made another plan for me to come back the following Tuesday again. This time Tyler and I both went. And because we weren't agreeing on what should happen. And I wanted him to look at the ultrasounds and talk to the doctors. And then we could talk about it again. So at this point, I was 18 weeks pregnant. And we went back to Vancouver. And we were ultrasounded again. One was by, oh, are you done now? Thanks. One was by a doctor that was doing an echo on Kinsley. And then showing us, and then looking at baby B again, Serafina. And looking at her head, and he was the one who said, like, yeah, now that she's a little bigger, we can see that her brain actually has midline breakdown. Like, her brain is not okay. And it was looking like, they're like, but then they also said that her cord it didn't have any reverse flow, but it had absent flow, and that she might actually survive the pregnancy. And if she did survive the pregnancy, she was going to be really sick. Like wheelchairs, trach, oxygen, feeding tube, the whole deal. Like, she was never going to be a healthy kid. And we had known that. So, yeah. So, we made a plan that the next week I would come back and they would ultrasound me, and then I would have a laser procedure to separate the girl's blood. And Tyler was going to come and be in the operating room with me. And yeah, I'll record more later. Okay, continuing. The light has changed, so it's a little darker in here, but whatever. So, I'd been away a lot in these it had only been 2 weeks, and it felt like it had been like a month and a half. So I was almost 20 weeks pregnant, I think. I was 19 weeks when I flew back to Vancouver to be there to get ultrasounded again, and then prep for, it was like an ultrasound for procedure. So I had that done, got instructions on what to do for checking in for the appointment for the laser. So I was supposed to check in on Wednesday evening, stay overnight at the hospital, have the procedure on Thursday, and then go home after a follow-up ultrasound, and then stay home until Kinsley was, until whatever, stay home until I was 26 weeks pregnant. So it's Wednesday, and everything's fine. I'm like getting ready to, I have my bag packed to go to the hospital for the night, and Tyler's in a plane on his way to Vancouver because he was allowed to be in the operating room with me. So we're just chilling, or I'm just chilling, watching TV, watching some Dr. Phil, because I love me some Dr. Phil. And I don't have cable, so I don't normally get to watch it, except for the YouTube clips. So I'm watching Dr. Phil, and I get a phone call from the hospital. I never used to be someone who answered my phone ever, and now I answer my phone all the time because I get so many phone calls all the time from the hospital. Still, steady, just medical phone calls. So I get this call, and it's the social worker from the hospital, and she's calling, and she says, "Hi, I'm this person. I'm calling to book your flights." And I'm like, "Book my flights?" It's like, "To go home already? Are we already planning for me to go home?" Like, okay, like we can plan my flight home. Okay, if you want to help me pay for flights, that's cool. We've been like paying for flights ourselves this whole time. And she says, "No, for your flight to Toronto." And I'm like, "Pardon me? What?" And she's like, "Yeah, you're going to Toronto." It's like, "No, I'm not. I'm having a procedure here tomorrow." And she goes, No, the scope is broken. You have to go to Toronto." And I was like, "Pardon? What?" So I was freaking out. And she's like, let me talk to the doctors and call you back." And I was like, "Okay." So I was losing it, like trying to call Tyler, but I couldn't get a hold of Tyler because he was literally in the air in an airplane, so like not using his cell phone. So I call my mom panicking, and I'm like, "What am I gonna do? Like, what the heck? What do you mean I'm going to Toronto?" And sure enough, like my awesome doctor calls me back and goes, "Yeah, I'm like super sorry, but the scope is broken. We can't do your procedure here. And we know that your babies don't have another week to survive in the state they're in now. So you have to go to Toronto." And I was like, "Okay, all right, okay, let's go then." So literally while Tyler's in the airplane, we arrange our flight from Vancouver to Toronto. And we use a charity. So we, like, by the time he had touched down, first we were planning to go to the hospital to meet the social workers so we could do everything in person. Then I got it all arranged as it was, so I took the C bus across to meet Tyler. We went back to his brother's house. He took a bath, and we went back to the airport to fly to Toronto. We had to take the last flight of the night because it was so last minute. So we had to take the 10:30 at night flight or something and fly. We were both in middle seats right behind each other. I'm like really pregnant at this point already. I was only 19 weeks, but I was measuring I think like 10 or 12 weeks ahead. So I was the size of a 32-week pregnant person. And I wish I would have taken more pictures, but I was quite big. I was, yeah, visibly pregnant. And in a middle seat, couldn't lean on anyone, just so we didn't end up sleeping the whole time, the whole flight to Toronto. And we get there. It's 3 hours ahead there, so it was a 5-hour flight. But by the time we landed, we just had to go straight to Mount Sinai Hospital. Speaking of which, I wish we would have kept more receipts from like trains and stuff. Anyway, so we got to try Uber, which was great. And then we go to the hospital and we go to this weird, like, dark dungeony, like, I don't even know what it was. Like, it was this weird, like, pre-procedure room, and it was small and dank and dark, and I got put in a bed and I was sleeping, and Tyler was nodding off in a chair beside me, and then I look up, and there's Tracy. She had caught I can't remember if we were WestJet or Canada, but she took the other last flight from whichever other company it was to meet us in Toronto so that she could be there for the procedure. I know part of it was for personal interest, but it was so good to have her there because I didn't have to try to reiterate anything. She had been there right from the start, so she could answer a lot of the questions that I had already answered 1,000 times. Because, every time you go to a different doctor, they ask you, like, the entire history all over again. And she could be there a little bit, and they started talking about the size discrepancy and saying, oh yeah, like, we noticed it's 16 weeks, and then they said no, it was actually started from crown to rump at 12 weeks, which was true. When I had my first ultrasound in Trail, it was actually then that they noticed that there was a size discrepancy. We just didn't think anything of it at that point. So yeah, my phone's probably going to die pretty soon, so this might have to continue later. But, let me pause this and plug it. So yeah, anyway, our ultrasound started again really early in the morning. And we hadn't actually seen a fetal cardiologist at this point, or a pediatric cardiologist. We'd only seen fetal ones. And they don't actually work on fetuses. They just, I don't know if that makes sense, but we had to see what Kinsley's surgical plan would be when she was born. So we had to go from Mount Sinai to Sick Kids, which is right across, like, in Toronto. There's, like, this hospital district where there's, like, these giant high rises that are all hospitals. And I guess underneath they're connected by tunnels, but you can, like, they're all different buildings and they're huge. It's crazy. They're, like, insane. And one of Kinsley's nurses told me, yeah, like, there's tunnels that go underneath the hospitals for, like, when you need to transfer patients, you can just do it underground, which is, like, mind-blowing to me. So yeah, so we ended up going over to, it was supposed to be really fast, and it wasn't. We went up over to Sick Kids, and we went into this little room that had a really old ultrasound machine, and they ultrasounded both the girls, and then we had to have a consult with the cardiologists, and they told us Kinsley's actual, like, we knew that Kinsley had a narrowed pulmonary valve, but they went into, like, what it looked like and showed us, like, a cardiac drawing to show, like, she had pulmonary stenosis, and there was a chance that during the rest of the pregnancy it would get worse and turn to pulmonary atresia, which is when the pulmonary valve is totally blocked off, and so there's no blood going through it, and so the right ventricle doesn't grow at all, which turns it to hypoplastic right heart syndrome, which means that her right ventricle wouldn't have grown at all, and she would have had a 3-chambered heart. Like, she would have ended up having to have 3 surgeries by the time she was 5 that made it so she had a single ventricle heart. And they were discussing the possibility of doing another fetal procedure on top of the one that we were already doing to try to do one of her procedures while she was in me. And, like, the MFM doctors were like, no, that's, like, not a thing that can happen. You can't have 2 fetal procedures. That's just not a thing. Like, that will most likely result in fetal demise. So, probably not going to happen. So, that took, like, 3 or 4 hours, and Tyler and I during all these ultrasounds were literally sleeping. We were so tired from traveling, and like we literally just slept. He slept in a chair and I slept while they were ultrasounding me because I was just done. So we go back to Mount Sinai. I get checked in for the night. They let me eat because they had said don't eat the night before. And so I hadn't eaten all day because we didn't know if we were going to get into the OR or not. And they said, no, we're not. The only OR slot is 3 a.m. And your procedure is really complicated. So I think it's better that we put it off for the night and come back in the morning fresh so that we can do it really well. And I was like, yeah, like it's because so they had like 2 little tiny windows to put the laser in because my placenta, like just where my placenta was stuck, they didn't have very many options on where they could go in. So it was actually part of why it was so complicated, was trying to find where they could put it in. Usually like if my placenta had been posterior and stuck to the backside of my uterus, it wouldn't have been a big of a deal, but it wasn't. So, pardon me. So the next day comes, and I get ultrasounded again. And this time I was ultrasounded by the head of the MFM department in Toronto. So by this point, like, I had been ultrasounded by every single MFM doctor. Like, not every single one, but, like, really, really good ones all over the country. And they were all telling me the same thing. And we had our decision made. And, yeah, so Tyler came. And I can't remember if it was like 1:30 or 2. The time kind of gets lost, but they had me go into like, all the hospital stuff. They started an IV, they did all that. And we go, and Tyler walks down with me to the OR floor, which like I got pushed by a porter and Tyler followed us. And there were it was so weird because like it was so stale in the OR area. Like it's really clean, so it was just like really, I don't know, it felt really sterile and really weird. And I was sitting on a bed, I had my chart, and Tyler was standing there, and we were talking to Dr. I can't remember his last name. Isn't that horrible? He was Belgian, so I don't remember what his last name was. It's in my page somewhere. But he was super cool and really chill, and we were talking to him about like what made him choose Canada as his place to come and practice medicine. And he was saying, well, he made a joke about Donald Trump and said, I wouldn't want to live in a nation governed by Donald Trump. And we laughed. And then he said, but also, like, the procedure you guys are having is really expensive. And I would hate for anyone to have to make the decision between trying to save their babies and money, because that's horrible. And we agreed entirely, because this procedure required 4 doctors in the OR. It's so weird because, like, my scar is tiny. I'll show it to you in a minute. And it still required 4 doctors to be in the room helping. And so anyway, I meet my anesthetist, and they take me into the OR. Tyler got given these paper scrubs to come in. He wasn't allowed to come in right away, though. They had to get the whole room prepped first. And I started panicking a little bit because I had it was a little bit of, I guess, like, trauma from my first C-section. And the way I had to be set up for this was pretty similar to my C-section. And, like, they had to strap my arms down and everything. And I started panicking a little bit. And Tracy, my awesome doctor, had stayed, and she told me she was going to stay until basically they were almost done, and then she was going to leave to get on a flight to go back to Vancouver, because she was like, much as I'd love to stay with you here till Monday, I'm not doing that because I got my own family. And I was like, yeah, of course, like, it'll be done. Like, why would you stay? So I started panicking. We were just talking, and she was telling me, like, reiterating what was going to happen during the procedure, and then she started like to like walk away, and I was like, can Tyler come in yet? Because I was starting to freak out a little bit. And she goes, why are you getting anxious? And I was like, yeah, like, this is reminding me of my C-section, and I'm kind of like freaking out about it a little bit. So she's like, okay, I'll stay till Tyler can come, which is awesome. She stayed and just like talked to me about random things, Paxton and whatever. And I don't really remember the conversation because it wasn't that important. So yeah, they had me all set up, put a curtain up. It really looks like a C-section. And Tyler comes in, and they have it, except they have a TV screen there where they have the camera with the lasers so that they can see what's going on. So Tyler comes in, the anesthetist is behind me, and I should know this by now, but it takes me a lot. Like, I need extra drugs to, like, I guess I have a high tolerance or something. So I'm just like I'm laying down, and they're like, okay, while we're getting you cut open, we're gonna put you to sleep for like 5 minutes, and then you'll wake up, because I got to be awake during the whole thing. So they're like, put you out, and then we'll wake you up. I was like, okay. So the only anesthetic I got was a local, right where they actually cut me. And yeah, so they give me the drug, and they're like 5, 4, 3, 2, and then I stayed awake, I guess, so they had to give me extra. And then I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up and going, how long was I asleep for? I was like, oh, just like 5 minutes. So after that point, the anesthetist actually left because I didn't need to be anesthetized anymore. Then I could hear like the buzzing of the, like, it would be like, and they're like mapping, and they're finding all the possible blood connections between the babies and severing them. I could hear zzz, zzz, and I could almost kind of feel it, but I don't know if it was a psychosomatic, like, feeling it because I heard it thing. But what was really weird is they had to go up really high, and I was quite pregnant already, and they actually knocked on my ribs with the laser, and I could feel it from the inside, and that was like, it didn't hurt, but it was just the strangest sensation I've ever felt in my life. So they did it all, and I was asking Ty what he could see on the screen, and he's like, exactly what you think a placenta would look like, that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, okay. So because they'd had to like infuse fluid to make me actually bigger, even, so that my placenta was totally stretched out. And yeah, so then it came to the end. They finished the procedure, and they said, okay, do you want to, we'll show you your baby's hands. And they showed us the baby's hands, and then we said, can we see Kinsley's face? Can we see baby A's face? And they were, at first I didn't realize why they were so hesitant, but it's because they don't want to be in there longer than they have to, because there's actually a risk of your water breaking while they're doing the procedure. So they showed us her face, and I was pretty excited because she looked just like Paxton. And she was so sweet, but her skin was all translucent, but she was so sweet looking. And they didn't show us Serafina because her face wouldn't have been okay. So they didn't show us, and she passed during that procedure. Yeah. She just passed. We're not going to talk about why or how. It happened. She just wasn't strong enough to make it out of that procedure. So they finished. We left. We spent the rest of the weekend in Toronto, and we went to Niagara Falls because at first I was afraid that to be away from the hospital, and then I realized that I was only 20 weeks pregnant to the day, and if I didn't go do something, like, even if I stayed closer to the hospital, there was nothing they could do for us at that point, because they told us that Kinsley wasn't even going to be viable until 26 weeks. But man, I didn't realize how distraught I was. I was in a lot of pain, like my uterus was like inflamed or something. Like, I was just achy and sore, and so walking was really difficult. And then I was also just in emotional pain because we lost a baby at that point. And so I look at our pictures from Niagara Falls, and it doesn't have a happy time to me. I look at it and go, oh my goodness, like I can see the pain on my face and I can go back and feel what that Sabrina was feeling. And just like everything had a heaviness to it for a really long time. Everything. Probably until Kinsley was born, and even after, everything was just really heavy. I was really sad because you go through a mourning period when you realize you're having twins. You go through like what you thought your life was going to look like because you only expected one baby. And then you get used to it and you go, okay, like I can do this. This is easy. Or it's going to be really hard, but like we can handle it. And then you like, I was so scared to have two babies, but I didn't think about how scary it would be to lose one and how hard it would be. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever really recover. Probably not. Because, like, how do you recover from it? And people who have never really had a miscarriage or lost a baby or a child will ever really understand that even though she didn't exist outside my body, she still mattered. And I loved her a lot. Anyways, so I had to wait till Monday. Was it Monday? I think. To have one more ultrasound in Toronto and make sure Kinsley was okay. They had to check this MCI in her brain. I don't know what that stands for, but it's this vessel in your brain that I guess is really important. And they had to check that and make sure she didn't have any bad things from the procedure, and she didn't. So we got to go home. And it was really hard to be ultrasounded the next few ultrasounds because Seraphina was just in there, not moving. And she didn't have a heartbeat, but I could still see her. And she didn't look okay because she was just in there. And so I ended up, like, Tyler flew home from Vancouver, and I stayed there because I had to get another ultrasound from my MFM team so they could go over everything. And the ultrasound tech I had wasn't very nice to me because from the point that I only had one baby alive in me, couldn't, at that point anyway, look at the screen that showed the ultrasound because it hurt me too much. Especially when they would scan Seraphina a little bit, I just couldn't look. So I had my phone out and I was very clearly not recording the ultrasound, and she was training someone. So she's like, you can't be on your phone. I'm like, I'm not. I can't look at the screen. And they said, we can turn the screen off. And I said, I want to see my daughter, but I can't look when you're scanning the other baby. I can't. So I started crying and I said, I'm not recording anything, but I can't look at the screen. And I lost it. I was crying a lot. And I stopped using my phone, and she just didn't talk to me the rest of the time. But she is really nasty about it. And then my good doctor came to talk to me, and she's like, oh, are you okay? Why are you crying? And I didn't tell her I was crying because the ultrasound tech was mean. I just said I'm just upset because I'm looking at everything again and seeing everything again. And she's like, oh, okay, fair enough. And then I had the thought to never have that ultrasound tech again. But I had her, and she was much better to me the next time. Which was, I think, can't remember how long later it was that I had her. I think I had her for my last ultrasound before Kinsley was born, so it was like 5 weeks later, because after this ultrasound I had in Vancouver, after Toronto, sorry, it's getting convoluted. So Toronto, had an ultrasound, went to Vancouver, had a ultrasound with the really horrible tech, then went home for 5 weeks because Kinsley wasn't viable yet. So normally babies are viable. In Vancouver, it's actually like 22 weeks, 6 days, 23 weeks-ish. But Kinsley was not viable because of her heart defect. They knew she just wouldn't survive. Couldn't do anything for her until she was 26 weeks. So that's when I went back to Vancouver. And the next 5 weeks were really crappy because I was just sad that I was leaving and sad that I lost a baby and sad that the baby I still had a congenital heart defect and she was going to be really sick. And like, I was in pain because I was still like had all the sciatica from growing so fast. And like, I think I had an infection because I had like this, I would get these really sharp pains in the lower left side of my uterus that had they been on the right side, I would have thought it was appendicitis. And it was really, really bad. And when I talked to the nurse about it, they shrugged it off like it was round ligament pain, and it wasn't. I'm pretty sure I had like choreo or something. Anyway, so maybe it wasn't. I didn't have a fever. I don't know. But there was something wrong. I was in a lot of pain. But anyway, so I had made all these plans, and I had a friend who I haven't actually even contacted yet because I'm horrible with people, but I had a friend offer to be my emergency contact so I could have Paxton down there at some point. And I went to Easter Seal's house, which was awful. And I was there, my bed was horrible, my back hurt, and I had a week where I literally, like, I was so depressed. I was just, like, laying in bed and playing my video games and watching crap on my phone. My TV in my room didn't even work. So I was just watching stuff on my phone and playing Pokemon that I went and bought, and, like, didn't have a lot of money to spare, so I had a little kitchenette in my room, and that was it, and it was just not good. I was really, like, sad and depressed. I would wake up and just lay in bed and then, like, maybe take the bus sometimes to Broadway and do some stuff there, but I didn't do a lot. So after a week, I had another ultrasound, and I'd had some fetal echoes with the cardiologist in Vancouver, and they had said, Kinsley needed to be 2.5 kilos before they could do anything for her. And they were having trouble seeing anything on the ultrasounds because her bones had gotten more solidified, so it was harder to see her heart. And so I had another ultrasound booked weekly until she was born. But that was all I had to do there was go to ultrasound. So I was so bored. I just had nothing to do. And man, I'm used to being a busy mom, and I had nothing. I just had nothing. And so after a week, we were like, well, screw this. Like, if I go into labor, they can get me here fast enough. Like, I don't need to be here. Like they can stop labor in Nelson and get me here and whatever. So it was literally like I was about to decide to just go home. And I had been in Vancouver for a week and a half, week and a half at this point. I'd gotten there on a Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday, and it wasn't even a week. It was like 5 days. So I got in there on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and on Saturday night going into Sunday, my water broke. I had just been laying in bed. Again, convoluted. So Saturday night, I was having these weird pains that were like contractions, and I was on the phone with my mom, and I was like, these are really weird. I was having to stop talking to her during these, and I was like, I think I should go get checked out. And she said, you should. You're right there at the hospital. That's why you're there. So I went there. I went to the hospital. They checked me out. I was having weird contraction-like pain, but they said it wasn't labor. I think it was at this now. It just wasn't rhythmic yet. So they said they couldn't do anything. And my cervix is posterior, so I got checked very viciously, which I think contributed actually to my water breaking. So they did an ultrasound. Everything was fine. Like, it was just a bedside one. And so stupid me walks back to Easter Seals when I shouldn't have. And I lay in bed. It's 11 o'clock. I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm watching videos on my phone. And 2 o'clock rolls around. I had just gotten up and gone pee, and everything's soaked. And I'm like, what the hell? I just went pee. I seriously peed my pants? I just went pee. How did I not know I had to go pee? So I reached down and come up, and my hand was covered in blood. And I was like, what the? And I freak out. I call Tyler. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, why are you calling me? Call an ambulance. So I call an ambulance. I'm freaking out. I hadn't turned the light on yet. I turn the light on, look at it, and realize it's not just blood. It's blood and amniotic fluid. Because people that have intrauterine procedures while they're pregnant go into labor or have their water break in an average of 10 weeks after. And I was at 7.5 weeks, almost 8 weeks after my procedure. So I was looking at it and realizing that this was amniotic fluid. And it looked exactly like the bleed that I'd had at 12 weeks when I thought that, when they didn't have an answer, which makes me think that Serafina, her side of the sac had ruptured. And I thought that earlier on in the pregnancy, and they told me that was highly unlikely, but it was amniotic fluid because it looked exactly, it was like there was blood in my amniotic fluid and it looked exactly like what came out when Kinsley's broke. So I was laying there, and it's why there were so many paramedics. I think 6 paramedics came because they thought I was actually going to have the baby or something. They had us so they came and they got me to the hospital. The hospital was so close, but I couldn't walk there, and I couldn't get a taxi because I was covered in my own blood, and there was just no way. So they get me downstairs to the ambulance, and they drive me there, and at the doors of the hospital, the paramedic, I guess, maybe wanted to practice doing IVs or something, so she tried to start an IV in the crook of my elbow and blew my vein out. I looked like a junkie because it was horrible. And I was like, what? I asked her while she's doing it. She's like, oh, I'm just going to start an IV. And I was like, why? And she's like, oh, because they're going to want one. I'm like, I'm already here. We're outside the hospital. Why are you going to start an IV now? And she goes, oh, they'll just want it started before I get in there. I'm like, I don't think they're going to mind. They know where I was. I was already here tonight. Can you just take me in? And no, she just had to blow my vein out and then just take me inside anyway. So we go inside. The same doctor, MFM doctor, who had viciously checked my cervix, comes back and says, why are you here? And every time I would stand up, bloody fluid would come out. So I just pointed at the floor where I had bled all over the floor and said, that's why I'm here. So they did an ultrasound, bedside one, and saw that there was no fluid around Kinsley anymore. And they're like, you're right, your water broke. And I was like, yeah, I know. Felt exactly like what happened when my water broke with my son. So yeah, then they got labor. I was starting to go into labor. I was having contractions. So they started giving me nifedipine, which is a drug it's actually a blood pressure medication that stops labor. And it was lowering my blood pressure a lot, so they couldn't give it to me the whole time. But they gave it to me, and it was stopping my labor, and they started an antibiotic to make sure that I didn't get an infection. And I called Tyler and said, you got to get here. Stuff may happen. And the rest I'm going to save for, I'm probably going to recap getting to the hospital, and the rest I'm going to save for another video because this one's already gotten really long. If you liked me talking about this and it interested you, maybe leave a like on the video. If you want to come back to hear about Kinsley's insane actual birth, because it's just as crazy, then subscribe, because I plan to talk about her actual birth and our time in the NICU and our time first coming home, and maybe our ongoing life having a ex-preemie who has a congenital heart defect. I also might talk about Paxton's birth if people would be interested in that, and my pregnancy with Paxton, even though it was really normal in comparison. Yeah, if you enjoyed your time here, then let me know. Yeah. And if you feel like sharing this video, I wouldn't mind either. Okay, thanks. See ya later. And that's it. You can hear my daughter crying in the background, but I'm just going to quickly film an outro. Thanks for coming to watch this video. If you made it this far, good for you. Thanks for trucking along. It's a long one, and it's kind of convoluted because I don't write a script, and maybe that's something I got to start doing. If you guys are interested in more of my life, and I'm gonna record our NICU journey, first my birth story and then our NICU journey. Leave a thumbs up, comment, like, share, do all the good stuff. Yeah, thanks for watching.